Have you ever taken a look at a wine label and thought, this is completely foreign? That's often the case when you're looking at a French or Italian wine label. So today we're going to jump into what exactly all those words mean and what they mean to you as a consumer. Stick around, we jump into a very foreign concept. Hi, I'm Tim from Alma Wine and Liquor. Today we are talking wine labels, particularly from France and Italy, and how to interpret all of the different words on these complex labels. France and Italy in particular, Europe in general, have been making wine for hundreds and hundreds of years, but modern labeling systems are still hundreds of years old. They continue to use this labeling system for the most part. Some winemakers are deviating a little bit from tradition, especially when they know that they're exporting the wine to the United States and making the wine labels easier to understand for American consumers. But for the most part, a lot of the big names in France and Italy still use this traditional system. So, some of the key aspects of what you're going to find on a French wine label is going to be the producer, or the name of the winemaker, the wine company, which will usually be near the top in pretty big bold letters. You will find the growing region, which will be something like Burgundy, Bordeaux, things like that, which they use typically instead of putting the grape varietal on there. So Burgundy is not a type of grape. It is a region in France. Burgundies are typically Pinot Noir, Gamay, Pinot Gris, those lighter style grapes. Bordeaux is Malbec, Merlot, Cabernet Sauv, Cabernet Franc. It's a little bit hardier grapes. The region, Syrah region of France, is going to be known for Sauvignon Blancs. The Alp region, which is over closer to Germany, will be Rieslings and Gewürz. So knowing the region is how you figure out which grapes are going to be in there. It then will sometimes have the kind of sub or the area within the area that the grapes come from. For example, if it says Chablis on the label, that is going to mean it is 100% Chardonnay. Chablis is not a grape, which is in the valley, is going to be a Sauvignon Blanc grape. Some of these things are just not going to be on the labels. You're either going to have to remember or look them up when you're in the store trying to figure out whether or not you're going to like that particular wine based on the region that it comes from. You're also going to find the vintage on the labels, which is the year that the grapes were grown and harvested. Then there's going to be the classification, if applicable. Sometimes they have these, sometimes they don't, but it will be a Grand Cru or a Premier Cru. This is an indication of the grapes are coming from a very particular region within that sub-region and that they're a particular quality. So those are not on every label, but they are on some. And then there's some miscellaneous terms, usually printed in French to make us even more confused about whether or not it was bottled at and by the estate, or whether it was old vines, or whether it's a cuvée, which just means a special blend for that year. So variety of other terms that could be on there, usually in French, like I said, so it's not always easy to understand unless you remember your high school French lessons. So we're going to break down these two French labels and go through those different elements that I just talked about. So on this bottle, we have the Chateau Roch de la, which I'm probably butchering, which is the name of the producer. It's the name of the house, the domain, the chateau, the company that is producing the wine. Up on this bottle of Chablis, it's Domaine Chantelamé. Again, probably not pronouncing that. I apologize to both producers, but those are the names of the actual producer. So they both could possibly produce multiple different Bordeaux's and or Chablis. But usually a producer in France is sticking to their region. That's where they are. That's where they grow their grapes. That's where they make their wine. A house or domain producer is typically sticking within their region. So a Bordeaux producer is mostly producing Bordeaux. They might also produce white Bordeaux, which could be Sauvignon Blancs, but that's what they're sticking within their region. So those are the producers on those two. After the producer, we are looking at the region. Like as I already said, Bordeaux. So Bordeaux is the region. And then over here we have, which is Burgundy. So again, even when you think things are going to be straightforward, they're not always straightforward because they use the French word for Burgundy, Bordeaux. And then this one is also a single vineyard designation, a subappellation, which is this Forchumé. Apologies again for butchering the pronunciation. But so we have the Bourgogne region and then the single vineyard designation of Forchumé. This one does not have that subappellation, it's just a Bordeaux. Then we get into the classifications. So this is a Bordeaux Superior, which means that the vines have to be at least 7 years old. It has to be aged for at least 1 year, and it has to be a minimum of 11% ABV. This one in particular is 14%. So that is to put that designation of Bordeaux Superior. This one is a Chablis, which is a Premier Cru. So that is the classification of the wines. Then we will jump into the vintage, which on this one is right up here, 2023. Some of these winemakers like putting it on this little necker because this part can all stay the same year to year. They just throw on that little top part. Versus this one is a 2022. And those are the years that the grapes were grown and harvested. And then finally, we have the Mise en Bottle au Chateau. On both of these bottles, that is stated, which means that the wine was grown, made, bottled at the estate of the winery. So it's another way of saying that is estate grown wine, which we hear more commonly in the US is phrased that way, where the owner of the winery is growing the grapes on their property and making the wine all on site and bottling it all on site. They're not buying grapes from somebody else, making it at a different facility, and then bottling it at a different facility. So those are the French label breakdowns. The region, classification, and vintage are the things that you're usually looking at. And then you're just going to have to know which grape varieties come from different regions. Next, we will jump over to our Italian wines. Italian wines are pretty comparable to French in the way that they present them. There's a couple small differences, but essentially we're still going to have the name of the producer, but we're also going to have the name of the wine or the brand, which might be different than the producer name. We will have a vintage on there, the year that it was made. We will have a classification of the region that it comes from. And that region, like France, is going to indicate to you what grape varieties it most likely is using based on that region. Italy has a ton of different regions, and they use different varieties in more different regions than in France, which tends to stick to certain varieties in certain regions. These neck tags on a lot of Italian wines, these both say DOC. Three main categories on that blue tag around the neck. It can either be up and down, as this one is, but DOCG is going to be the highest level, DOC, and then IGT. Now, these, while I said highest level, mid-level, lower level, doesn't always necessarily indicate quality. It's more of an indication of how well the winery is following the rules of that particular region that it is grown in. So the grapes have to be grown in very specific geographic areas. The wine has to be made with certain varieties and only certain varieties, has to be made in certain ways. And every geographical region is going to have slightly different rules. Some winemakers will say, I'm not following any of the rules. They won't even have an IGT. And they make their wine differently. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just they don't want to follow the rules for that region, so they can't use that region name, and they don't get this little blue sticker to put on their bottles. So don't take that as gospel of whether or not the wine is good or not. It's just an indication of how true it is to the variety of that region. As with French wines, like I said, they're usually using the regions in Italy. Occasionally they will put the grape variety on the labels, but not always. It's just something that you have to learn and get to know, or pull up a cheat sheet or Google, ChatGPT, whatever, to figure out which varieties come from different regions and what you like or don't like about them. The alcohol by volume percentage is going to be on there somewhere. It's oftentimes on the back of the label, but sometimes it's on the front as well. And then there's going to be some miscellaneous terms like classico, which denotes something a little bit better quality, or reserva, similar kind of thing. It might be aged longer with reservas. Superiors, which often have higher alcohol content. So these are just some different words that are going to be on rosso, blanco, rosato are other words you'll see on the labels, which red, white, or rosé. So you can see, if just in case you couldn't look through the bottle, like on this dark bottle of white wine, if it's said blanco, you'd know, or blanc, you would know that it was a white wine. So let's use these two Italians to break down the labeling and how you're going to look and read a Italian wine label. So starting with the producer names, Camillo Montanori and Paitin. So those are the producers. And then we have the names of the actual wine. Serra or Fontecupa, Trebbiano d'Abruzzo. Apologies again on the pronunciations. I'm sure I'm not nailing them. We have the producer, the name of the wines, and then we have the region, Barbera d'Asti, or the Trebbiano d'Abruzzo. Trebbiano is actually the grape variety on that. The D means it is from the Alba region. D from the Abruzzo region. Sometimes they will actually put those grape varieties on the labels for us to make it a little bit easier, but not always. Both of these are examples of them doing that. Both of these are DOCs, as we already talked about. The vintage, which is again up here on the Neckar, 2024, and this one is a 2023. So all the grapes were grown in those particular years and harvested. There's oftentimes generalizations made about certain years in certain countries, or just in general. What is a good year in Italy might not be a good year in France, or has nothing to do with California. Even within Italy, there are different microclimates, or within France, that sometimes the Bordeaux region might have the best year ever, while the Burgundy region has a horrible year. So don't just say, oh, Uncle Fred said we're amazing wines. What was Uncle Fred talking about? Abruzzo region? Or was he talking about the Bordeaux region of France? Or was he Napa Valley in California? So the vintage can tell you stuff, but it's not the be-all and end-all. A lot of these winemakers, if the wine is not good enough, they won't sell it, or they make less that year. And that's sometimes what it means by a bad year, is they just didn't get a good harvest out of it, so there's less wine. Sometimes that could be even better quality overall. The years can tell you stuff. Just make sure you understand what it's telling you before you make general assumptions. That's our breakdown of French and Italian wine labels. I hope that helps you a little bit the next time you walk into a store and start looking at some European wines, so you can figure out what you're buying, how to say it, whether you're talking about the producer, the region, or something else. If you have any other questions on these labels, or if you've ever had a particular French or Italian wine that you've loved, please drop it in the comments below. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Please hit that subscribe button before you leave. We'll see you soon. Cheers.